Okay, we are going to get started here today. I don't believe that you can see me. So as far as working with the Zoom, if you have a question, go ahead and chat. I think we have close to 20 people or 12 or something. I'm not counting to see how many are on. I'm just gonna get started. And if you have a question, you can either unmute or type the chat. It's less interrupting if you can type your question in the chat screen. So on the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you hover, if you don't see the chat option, just hover along the bottom and you will see the chat option. Okay, so I turned on my machine, but as you can see, I have some red information here. I wanted to do all of that with you guys watching. So there is the Mastery Embroidery class workbook that is available online through my website. It takes you to bernina.com, and the Mastery workbook I have printed out, and a lot of people have printed it out also. Uh-oh, what happened to my screen here? There we go. Must have bumped something. Okay, so this is what the Mastery workbook looks like, but there are hypertext links buried in the book that look like this. Click here for video. So if you keep it as a download too, that might be handy so you can go back and watch some of those videos. Now, some of you have 770s, some of you might have a 590, some might have a 790 or an 880. They're all able to embroider. Of course, any of the 5 series have the smaller embroidery module, which just kind of limits you as to what size embroidery hoops you can put on. So if it's a little different because of your machine, that's fine. The new update for the 770s, a lot of our folks have gone through that now. And the 770 upgrade, after you go through it, you get this box. And there is a foot attachment and some couching feet in there that are valued at $180. So make sure you take that out. But now this is going to make your 770 more similar to a 790. The 790 is definitely still a step up with all the other functions that it has. But one thing that you will have to do that you weren't used to doing before was selecting the foot attachment. Before with the 770, when you put, say, like a 10D foot on, you didn't have to select it. Now you do have to put that in. All right, so what I decided we're going to do is we're just going to start from the beginning. And I'm going to actually load a design. I'm going to go through a lot of the features that the workbook talks about, but I function better just by actually doing. And hopefully you're sitting in front of your machine and you can pull up something similar or the same design. So the first thing that we're going to do when we sit down to embroider is we're going to go home and select embroidery. So that's where I was before. And when you are going through the different menus here along the right-hand side of the screen, these are what are critical. And that's how you operate going from different screens. So this one is the folder screen. So I'm going to show you that. So here's what your options are. You can go up on top to get a design. You can copy You can save a design or you can trash whatever you have. Now, I rarely use the 3 on the bottom. The main one that you will use is the top one, because that takes you to where you are going to get your pattern. And what you focus on here is, are you in the machine on the left, or are you going to go to a USB stick like a Kimberbell and select a design from there? So what I'm going to do, I don't have a USB in my machine right now. We're just going to use a design that is in the screen. So what are these folders? On the 790, you have 4 folders. On a 770, you would have 3 folders. So if my screen looks different and you're sitting in front of a 770, that is why. You would also have 4 folders if you have a 590, a 790, or an 880. The 570 would have 3 folders as well. The one extra folder that the 770 has is the stitches folder. So and that is from the sewing side. So whenever you see the straight stitch with the zigzag, that means sewing. You'll see that also in your settings. You have the ability to change your settings in your sewing side, in your embroidery side. So the zigzag and that. So I'm not going to spend time with that, but what that does is you can embroider any of your sewing stitches. Now that might seem a little foreign, and I'm not going to show that today because not everybody has a 790, but basically you can take any of the stitches, a decorative stitch, and maybe fill your hoop with that stitch and create a background design. Or you could take buttonholes and embroider your buttonholes and have them evenly spaced versus marking whatever it is that you're putting them on. So you have your letters, your motifs, and then any saved projects in your heart folder. So we'll go in. And on the 790, I'm going to pick this one, number 1. So it doesn't really matter. If you want to go through and see where on the machine that particular design is, you can find it. I know it's on in different folders on the 790 or on the 770. I am in the 790. I'll repeat that one more time just to show you. So I'm going to go back on the breadcrumb menu to here. I'm going to select motifs, and on the 790, it's on file number 5, and it's showing. It may not be showing on your folder if you have a different machine. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. But now what this does, and I typically will go in, whether it's a USB or a motif that is on the machine, and bring it up first before I do anything. Why do I do that? Because it will tell me what hoop I need to have. Okay, so if you look on the left where my finger is, that is the hoop size. So this one is a medium hoop. If I wanted it, and I should say, the machine is going to select the hoop that is most appropriate for the design that you are taking. You want to match your hoop size to the project size. If you take a big maxi hoop and you want to embroider something really small in it, that's not ideal. Number 1, you're going to be using a lot more stabilizer. But number 2, it's it's going to have more likelihood of puckering because it's such a small design in a big hoop. So this machine says I should get the medium hoop, which is the square hoop. However, I'm not going to do that. I am going to use an oval because I'm going to show you how to add a motif. I'm going to add my name to this picture because that's something you may not know how to do yet. Okay, so I am going to go over here and touch the medium hoop, and I'm going to change it to the oval, which is right next to it. It might be hard for you to discern, but that medium hoop is white. It is the one that's selected. So I'm going to touch the oval hoop, and now the picture in the screen shows an oval hoop, and now the oval hoop is white and is selected. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do, is just make sure that I have the right design. And Molly, oh, you're in the bathroom. You're welcome to listen to this too. Oh no, you're not in the bathroom. Okay, you're welcome to listen to this if you want. Yeah, Molly is here and she's got a new 790, so this is all new to her too. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, there's more that I want to show you in this hoop window, but the next thing that I typically do is I'm going to set up my machine. And there's a few steps that I'd like to show you with that as well. First of all, I left these out so I could address them. The yellow high tension bobbin case is required for embroidery. I will say there is an exception, and that is when we are doing sewing projects in the embroidery hoop, such as making a zippered bag. That is sewing. So I use my regular black bobbin case for that. What the yellow case does, it creates higher tension on the bobbin. So it pulls the top thread more to the bottom of the design. If you use the yellow bobbin for a sewing project, you might get away with it. But what I have found is when I do, especially like some Kimberbell quilting, that's when I really noticed it. We were making a project where it was little, what do I call them? Little trays, little tiny trays, and it was doing the quilting, and the tension was off on them. We switched to the black bottom or black bobbin case, and it was perfect. So this is perfect when you have a typical embroidery design, such as a flower. You don't want to have any bobbin thread showing, and you want that top thread to get pulled to the back. It really does make a difference. So make sure that you have this. The yellow bobbin case only comes with our embroidery only machines. So if you have a 500 or if you have a 700 embroidery only machine, you don't have to purchase this separately. It comes with that. The other thing that you'll be doing whenever you embroider, when you come to class or whatever, when you're at home, you want to make sure that you have the 26 embroidery foot. The 26 is stamped right on the top there, and it kind of looks, it's got a spring on it and it bounces around. So you can see I don't have my feed dogs down. I don't have my 0 millimeter plate. And I think that's in the cupboard. And it says that I have a different foot on. Well, it says that I have, you can see it says 26, but there's a red caution sign, which means I did not select it. So I'm going to take off the 1C foot, and I'm going to put on the 26 foot. The other thing is you want to make sure that you change your needle to embroidery. Needles are the least expensive tool that you will be using for your machine. And you want to make sure that you are using the right needle for the machine. I think it's probably out somewhere. So the embroidery, whenever you use that single stitch plate, it's the one that has the orange square on it, and it has a single hole. The purpose of this plate is to prevent needle deflection, because your needles are thin, and when it's moving at a high rate of speed, either for sewing or embroidery, that needle can move around. It's not going to be able to move around when you use the 0 millimeter stitch plate. So that is what is recommended. So we're going to go ahead and take off that stitch plate. You just press on the bullseye and then both thumbs pick that up. And then and I don't have thread either. I'll need some thread. So then we're going to slide the left-hand side on first. My arm is in the way. We're going to tilt it like this and then snap it down. No. Maybe a couple of different colors. Yeah, that's fine. That'll show up. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead. This is our reminder. We don't have to change tension. When we put in a new needle, we would go in, the screwdriver and a pack of embroidery needles. So we're going to go in, we'll see what Molly brings me, but I'm going to go in first of all, instead of going into the needles, I'm going to go into the foot, and I'm going to use the little magnifying glass up here, type in 26, and I'm going to select it. Doesn't matter if you select this one or this one. However, you do want it to be white and you want it to have the green check mark. If you don't have the green check mark, if you touch it too many times, you are deselecting it. So you want the green check mark, and then you can close out of that. And now your screen on the foot attachment does no longer have the red caution sign. I have the right hoop. I was already in there. And I am going to change the stitch plate from 9 millimeters to 0 millimeters. So most of you don't have, thank you. Most of you do not have the other plates. I have a few customers that have the punch tool. The 0 millimeter cut is an older plate for older machines. And the 5.5 millimeter is, well, some of you might have purchased that. What that plate is for 9 millimeter machines where you have the bigger feet, you can purchase a 5 millimeter stitch plate for your machine. And what does that do? That gives you a smaller opening than this. This is a 9 millimeter stitch plate. A 5 millimeter is going to be a little bit smaller. It's going to be a 5.5 millimeter stitch plate. Why would a person want that? Maybe if they're sewing something special, not quilting, but say you're making a wedding veil and maybe you're going to zigzag that veil fabric. If you can imagine, that veil fabric would be very thin. This is a large divot. It's a big, wide expanse. It's 9 millimeters. If you had a 5.5 millimeter stitch plate, it would be less likely for that fabric to go into the feed dogs or get stuck in that hole. That's why people have that. giving you more information than what you need, but that's why, if you were ever wondering. So I don't have any thread on this machine, and I'm going to pull the thread out from above the needle, because we always clip our thread at the top and remove it from underneath the needle. Now this is the Crystal Edition. Holy smokes, is that ever tight? That's straight from the factory. And it must have been a weightlifter that screwed that needle in. I don't know if I've ever had one that tight. So this is the needles that I'm using for embroidery. It's jersey / embroidery needle. We have other needles too. I could give a whole lecture on needles, and I probably will do that at some point. But this is what we have been using. This one is not a super sharp needle because it's also a jersey needle. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. So these are all the steps that you need to do in order to prepare for embroidery. So now I'm in the needle, and I always use the needle minder. And I would like everybody in the shop to do that too, so we don't have to wonder what needle is in there. So what it does, these are 80 needles, size 80, and it's an embroidery needle. So I am going to go in and find embroidery. On my 790 here, it's on page 2, third one down. And that matches the numbers. So all these numbers mean something. So 130/705 HSUK is the embroidery needle, and it's an 80. So I'm going to select embroidery, and then I'm going to select 80. So if I walk away from my machine and I forget what needle I have, it's recorded in the machine. Your machine will sew whether you use it or not, but it is a helper for you to be able to have that on. How often do you change your needles? Well, when you're embroidering, you're doing a lot of stitches at once. So after every embroidery project, you want to change your needles, and probably as far as hours go, like 4 to 6 hours of stitching, you'll want to change it. So now I'm going to address the feed dogs. I'm going to depress that on the right-hand side of my machine. It's over here on the bottom. It is a square, and make sure that that is down. Next, we're going to put in our bobbin. This is the reminder when you're going down this list, what needs to be changed. So whenever we're embroidering, we are going to use either the white bobbin thread, and they also make a black bobbin thread. White bobbin thread is the primary one. The black is used for darker projects, or maybe if you're making something for, like right now, Halloween, if you're making the Halloween OESD haunted house, you would want that. So when you touch your bobbin at the bottom, it brings up the video on how to thread the bobbin. So just like your black bobbin, you're going to put the metal to the metal, have them kiss. And then we're going to go ahead and rotate it so it goes through the slit on the side. Then I always hold the bobbin case towards me, and I go underneath the bottom paper clip. It's just a wiggly kind of paper clip thing, and it clicks into place. Pull it a little bit so it is going to spin, and that is ready to insert. So now you can embroider with this top part on, this table tray. But I'm going to remove it while I put the bobbin in so you can see. Gonna push at the 3 o'clock position, and this black one will pop right out. And we'll go ahead and put the yellow bobbin in. Clicks into place. There is a thread cutter off to the side. Works great. Now I'm going to show you how to install your module. So this machine has the new SDT module. And I know when I walk away, my voice isn't as loud. It's okay. That's not on. So to install your module, you go at it with an angle and you align the ports and then you gently just drop it down. To remove it, it's the same thing. You lift it up and slide it out. Okay, that's how that works. And you should hear a little click. You can hear it like engaging. If you don't hear that click, it's not engaged and you're going to get a module error. It's not going to connect. So we have had instances where I've had to try to troubleshoot with folks where maybe there was a joint on their sewing table. If the machine is not perfectly level with the embroidery module, it's not going to connect. So I've had uneven surfaces. If your table that you are sewing on is weak and it's going to bow inwards from the weight of the machine, you will have an error message. So it's important that you're working on a nice solid surface, and you don't want your module arm to be hanging off of the edge, or if it does on your table, you have to be extremely careful that you don't bump this, because then you'll have to recalibrate. We've had that happen in class. Be careful if you have a spinning chair and the back of your chair will hit it. I have also had where somebody has lost some of the rubber feet off of the bottom side of their machine. And my husband and I were trying to troubleshoot that. And I couldn't figure out why that module wasn't connecting. But he then mentioned, well, look at this machine is touching here, but it's not touching here. Now, there's not much difference there. And I thought that was pretty good of him to be able to notice that. But when we disconnected the module and turned the machine over, it was missing a rubber foot. And that is why it wasn't connecting. So he put a new foot on and then they were back into business. So there's a lot, I mean, it's very sensitive. So once we get our construction done, you can see if I can show you. There it is. There's the door into our classroom right here. And they're painting in there. And I think that door might be coming down today. It's coming down this week anyways. At least that's what they say. Once we get that done, then this main room that I'm in is going to have a bunch of different choices of tables for you. I have 3 different styles of tables that come from Bernina that are made by Horn, which are very, very nice. I have some koala tables, and I also will have some arrow tables. And I'll have some really neat chairs that are coming, but I have to just kind of hold back delivery because our room isn't done quite yet. So, all right. So now what we're going to do, we've got everything set here. I want to go through and I'm going to click on the hoop over on the left-hand side, and I want to go through a couple of things here with you. All right, so over on the right-hand side, when that window opens up, those are all the different hoop sizes. Now, what are all these other buttons that are to the left of that? Anything that has a P stands for park. Okay, so you can park in the center, you can park so your hoop moves out of the way, or you can park so your arm of your machine goes to the left. When I end a design, I typically am going to park my hoop so the arm of this module here is going to move all the way over. That's where this one is right now. So this one was parked. I have never really found a use for the center one. I'm sure there's one out there. Sometimes with your 790, if you have a problem in your bobbin area and maybe you don't like the position of where your embroidery hoop is because it's too close to where the needle is and you can't comfortably get in there to remove things, well, you can hop over into this window and park it to the back. So it's going to move the hoop to the back so you can get easier access to this. The 880, as soon as you open the door on your bobbin case, it will do that automatically. It's a nice feature. All right, so next is the grid lines. What does that do? That is a 3-step process. So right now, I don't have any grid lines. Maybe you do. It's just you're in a different window. But I want you all to go ahead and touch the grid line one time. And what happens, you can't really see it on my screen unless I move this design out of the way, and I'm not in the right screen to do that. But what that one time, it added a yellow outline. But if you look carefully, there is a pink crosshair in the middle of your screen. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2, when you touch it, it enables all of the grid lines. Those grid lines correspond with the grid lines on your plastic templates that come with the hoop that I hardly ever use. The only reason I use those templates is for calibrating my hoops. Okay, if you touch it one more time, everything is off. So that's what I mean by it being a 3-step process. Okay. The other one, right below the grid line, is the center of the hoop. Okay. And the very last one should always be on, which it is. And I forget what they call that, but it's always on. Okay. So whether you want grid lines or not, I think for purposes of what I'm going to do today, I am going to put it so I have the grid lines, because I'm going to add to this design and it'll be handier for me to see how I'm placing it with those grid lines on. Okay, so we're into half an hour. So I'm going to see how long I can go. It depends on what goes on at the shop here today. I only have one person helping me today, and that's Molly. She's watching. So far, we're not, we're going to be open at 10, so maybe somebody will come in. Jess is on vacation this week. Julie was on vacation last week. So we're trying to get all of our work done. We'll just see how it goes. If I can go longer, I will show you pinpoint placement. And if not, that's where I will pick up the next time. So I'm going to leave the grid line on. Okay. So where I'm at right now, I'm in the main screen for embroidery, and the pencil on the side for that tab, that is called the editing tab. You cannot sew out from the editing tab. So if you're trying to embroider and you have a red button, you're not in the right place. That's why it's red. You can't sew when it's red, but that's okay. I'm not trying to sew yet. If I went down, there's the coloring sequence tab where you can change colors and get an idea of what it would look like prior to sewing. You can use it or you don't have to use it. It's an option available to you. It's sort of like the needle minder. If you use it, great, it's a help to you. If you don't use it, your machine will still sew. The last button is the sew out screen. And whenever you do that, you'll see this, and that's normal, that's fine. I'm going to X out of that though, so I can go back to the editing screen. I was just wanting to show you, these are the main menus for embroidery. Okay, but I'm still editing. So I wanna add to my design. I wanna add to my design. This I up here is information. I call it the I wanna button. I wanna do something to this design, okay? So the first thing that I'm going to do is show you what is in that button. So let's go ahead and look at it. Now, if you have an upgraded 770, you'll have more buttons in this I wanna button than you had previously. If you have a 770 that doesn't have these buttons, then you will have less. The 790 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's a little bit of one showing. That's 11. And I can touch and hold and push upwards to see a couple more. So 11, 12, 13. The 790 has 13 different buttons. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do, these are, for some people that have had previous computer experience, I have sold 790s to people that had worked with computers on their job previously. And they have some of my customers have been very intuitive with these buttons. This button will change the direction of your the very first one that has the arrows in a crosshair. That will either raise your motif up or down in the hoop or left and right. You can touch that and it opens up an X and Y axis. In algebra, if you remember working with number lines and things like that, or planes, if you have an X and Y axis, the X axis is horizontal. So horizontal. The width is your horizontal button, right? Because it'll go left or right. The Y axis is your vertical. It'll raise it up or down. So go ahead and crank on your buttons, move it around. Try both of them and it will make sense. When you engage them, they turn yellow. If you want to bring your design back to center, hit the center screen underneath that and it moves it back. If you didn't like it, you can change it. The other thing that you can do is just touch your design and move it with your finger or your stylus on your screen. Sometimes I say little kids have an easy time with technology today because they just go ahead and touch. You can feel free to just go ahead and touch and drag it around. And what happens when you go off of the screen, it disappears. If you tried to sew that, it's not going to sew it. But I'm going to go ahead and move this about right here on the bottom. And now I'm still within the hoop and I moved it down And I can see that my x-axis, I'm at -127 and my y is -610. I don't really care if you follow me exactly. But if you wanted to change that, you can just go ahead and do that. Okay, if you touch the X, it's going to bring it to center. If you touch the Y, it's going to bring it to the center of the hoop. So that kind of makes sense just by you playing with it. And again, I'm just going to touch and drag it. It's just a way for me to quickly move it because, you know, when you're designing, you want to be quicker about it. Okay. Let's look at some of the other buttons. If we touch the one to the right of it, obviously that is a circle with an arrow that's going this direction. So if we move with our Y or the X-axis or the zigzag, you can move it and spin it. Maybe you want it angled. Maybe you want it this way. It depends on your design. Okay. If you get a red outline around your hoop, your design is off of the hoop and that's in the no-sew zone. So you don't want to see red. Red is always bad. You don't want to see red around the perimeter of your hoop. Okay, so now I'm going to just touch back on the little eye and it brings me back. Oops, brings me back here. Gotta get back. There we are. So I'm all done with that. And you can't turn it off. Once you touch it, you touch it. Okay. This one is sizing. So the little square inside of the square, which is below the north, south, east, west arrows, that one is sizing. So when you touch that, you can make your design bigger or smaller. But here's what I want to caution you about that. There's something called the 80-20 rule. So this design has, let's say it takes 50,000 or 100,000 stitches. Let's use easy math. If you make it bigger, there's still going to be 100,000 stitches in that design. And if you make it twice the size, say at 200%, it's going to be so big. Let me move it in the center. It's going to be so big, you're going to have your background fabric showing through because it's still 100,000 stitches. So you don't want to go bigger than 120%. Okay. So as we do that, we bring it up to 120. There we go. Even that might be a little bit grainy. It might not have a really nice fill. If you shrink it, you don't want to go less than 80%. So I usually tell a story of my earlier learning days because I've made a lot of mistakes. And when I make mistakes, they become teaching opportunities. So it was a New Year's Eve and I was learning my embroidery. What a great time to learn embroidery on New Year's Eve. I didn't have to work and I was just out playing. So I took a design that was meant to be physically about this big and I shrunk it down to about this big. I'm lucky I didn't wreck my thread cutter on my machine because embroidery cuts thread a lot between stitches, between different colors and so on. So I took, let's say that 100,000 stitches that was supposed to be this big, and now I crammed it into a size that was this big. Well, I tell you what, when I took that off of the hoop, and I kept having problems with it too, I tell you, But when I took it on the back, when I looked on the back side of that design, oh my gosh, there was so much thread buildup on the back side because I didn't understand the density portion of my design work. So don't reduce it less than 80% and don't increase greater than 120%. So what happens here in this screen is these are both going simultaneously. Okay, in the middle, there's a lock button. It's white right now. I can unlock it and then make it so the aspect ratio is different. So I have 78 on top and 59 on the bottom. There is that option as well. If you want them both to go at the same time, it opens up and it is locked because most of the time you don't want it to get real squat. So just to show you, well, let's make it this way. Sometimes if you overemphasize, you can see the difference. So here I have 145% on the top and 58 on the bottom. So that doesn't look good at all. So we'll go ahead and make them both the same. And if I touch each of those boxes, that's a quick way where you don't have to start cranking on the dials on the multifunction knobs. Okay, bring this back. Okay. All right, so that takes care of that one. Pinpoint placement is the next one, and that's where you might not hoop something completely straight, but yet you can have your design be pinpoint perfect, and it will skew it in the hoop for you. I hope that I have time to show you that. The next one is the mirror image. So go ahead and touch that and you can see what that does. It turns it on and off. It just kind of flips it. The next other one is also a mirror image up and down. So when would you use these? Well, it depends on what it is you're designing. And sometimes you have to hoop something maybe sideways in a hoop. So you have the options to quickly flip and change your design. The next one down is copy. So if you touch that, you can see there's a light gray design in the back. So we made a copy of that. And now we have 2 layers on our screen. If I click on the bottom layer, now I can view both of them because everything is showing. So it added that second layer. Maybe I don't want that. I'll touch one or the other, doesn't matter which one, to highlight it. Now that that's highlighted, I can do something with that one too. And maybe I'm going to just get rid of that one. So I'm going to hit the garbage can. And it brings up this screen here. And I say, yes, throw it into the garbage can. Yes is the green. So now I am back with having one design on my main screen. Okay. The next one is endless embroidery. If you engage that, you get this screen. That really is a lesson in of itself. But basically, you're setting up your machine to repeat that pattern over and over again. Maybe you have a table runner where you want to have these flowers stitched out and you want them to be evenly spaced on your 6-foot long table runner. It's possible to do that. And what it will do is it will stitch some placement marks that you will align as you rehoop. So if you've done some Kimberbell, Kimberbell is a great way to learn embroidery because sometimes they use something similar where they have markings that stitch out, and it's basically some thread L's that, you know, it's like a letter L, capital letter L, and where those 2 points meet, that's becomes where you're going to line things up. Anyway, that is a lesson 2. So I'm going to hit the red X on that because I don't want that. So we use the garbage can. The check button, what that does, it's going to check where your design is. And that is one where it's going to want you to put the hoop in. So that's why it's doing this. Well, it's not to put the hoop in, but to synchronize. So I'm going to go ahead and synchronize my arm by hitting the green on that. And this is happening where your arm is going to move. That must always happen before you embroider. And this is the new module, so it's really quiet. And now when you get this screen, that's when it's time to put the hoop in. When you see that picture, don't put your hoop in before you see this, because your machine is smart and it will tell you when it's time to put your hoop in. A lot of times I have people that are super anxious to get started, and they bring out their module, they put their hoop on, they're all set to go. And then they say, why does my machine always tell me to take my hoop off? And it's because they put it on too soon. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you my hooping. Whoa, okay. So I like to use this master hooper. The master hooper is a way for you to not have your hoop get away from you. And it really holds it because it has the same bracket as what's on the machine module. And then what I do, I put the bottom one on, and just so you know, the bottom of the hoop has a little triangle. So when you take your inside hoop and you're looking at it going, which way is up, which way is down, you know you have the right side when you have these marks that are on the sides. That is the top of the hoop. And at the bottom then you will see the little triangle. Triangle matches the triangle. So that's how that goes in. Then for hooping, you put your stabilizer down. And in this case, I'm going to hoop my fabric also. Kimberbell, rarely. I don't think they have a project where they hoop their fabric, but that's just Kimberbell. They use placement lines and they have you put your fabric on top. I prefer to hoop the fabric because it holds it and it has less opportunity to pucker. Looks like I cut this kind of close, but it'll still work. So now I picked up everything, as you saw, all together. You don't lay the fabric down. The way that I just did it is the recommended way. And that's how they taught me at Bernina. And I thought, boy, that sure eliminates a lot of problems. And I start at the bottom and I work my way up. Sometimes you have to loosen, and that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to squeeze it off and tighten, but I'm also going to make sure that I have a little bit of the bottom pushed out just a little. I call that burping your hoop, because you don't want the plastic of the outside hoop to scratch your nice stainless steel throat of your machine. Okay, so typically I would have ironed this, but this is just fresh off of, let me get me straight here. Fresh off of the bolt. And I'm just using a poly mesh stabilizer. You'll learn techniques when you take embroidery classes with us. So now that the machine recognizes that we have a hoop on, we're going to get this screen. And that just says, hey, you put the hoop on. And I'm going to hit the green button and say, yes, I did. So now it moved into place. And now where I was in the check screen, if you recall. A few short minutes ago, I was in the check screen. So that's why I have this up here, okay? So if I want to check where the upper right-hand corner is, I know that that's where I'm at because I have that bullseye there. If I want to see where my upper left-hand corner is, I can move it there. Just by touching the arrows, it's showing me where that design is going to stitch out. Okay, sometimes it's handy to do that. If you're doing an embroidery buddy and you don't have a whole lot of room on the teddy bear's belly, you can use that and it's going to move around. I would also baste it prior to sewing, but I haven't covered basting yet. And I will be doing that too. So that is just called the check screen. I'm going to go ahead and go back one by touching the eye. And what else do we have? We have group and ungroup. So I am going to show you that next. If you have an upgraded 770, this is a new feature for you. So I'm going to go ahead and press that. And the reason why I chose this design, I think it's really easy to see what happens when we group and ungroup. So now I have this window, which has 2 dots and a minus sign. And I'm going to say ungroup. So now what happened is I have all these different layers. Because I ungrouped the design. How it ungroups depends upon how the designer who created the design designed it. So for example, Julie, who works here, she wanted to embroider an Upper Peninsula. So she purchased online state of Michigan. But when she got it and brought it here, because she doesn't have a 790, she had the old 770, we played with it here in the shop and we tried to ungroup it. We couldn't. The designer had designed that in layer 1. So it doesn't work for every design, but it depends upon the design. If you wanted to separate out that Upper Peninsula, you could do that if you had the designer software. So with that, I'm going to go off on a tangent a little bit to let you know what your options are for software. Because software allows you to do things like that. So after Bernina University came out in July, they introduced an upgraded designer software. It used to be Designer Software 8.2. And now they have Designer Software 9.0. And what that has, there's more features. If you're not familiar with it, you don't know what you're missing. And that's okay. But the main feature is it is Wi-Fi compatible. So if you have your Wi-Fi device, which comes with the software, installed in your USB hub, it's going to pick up from your computer whatever design you have, and you can load it in to your machine. That software is for people that understand computers pretty well. And I do have customers that have that. If you don't know how to save or email a picture, or if you have trouble saving to a USB, that software is not for you. However, the other choice that we have is called Toolbox. Toolbox is definitely a more user-friendly way of learning to do software. You can, it gives you so many more letters, different sizes of letters that you don't have to worry about density. You can make quilt labels, and that's probably the most common request is I want to make a quilt label. You can do that with Toolbox. There's lots of motifs available that you can download. It is working on a computer. You do save it to a USB stick, but then you bring it over to your machine and you can add to it. There is 30-day trials for both of those available as a one-time use. So if you're considering software for embroidery, go ahead and do that. It's a great way to try before you buy. So Toolbox has 3 different parts to it. There's editing software, there's monogramming software, and there's the letters. So you get all the motif. The best thing to do is to buy it all, because it's like buying 2 parts and getting the 3rd one for free. So I'm pretty sure most people have done it that way. Now, while I'm off on this tangent, I'd like to just mention to you, and I'll show you later if I have time, the way to purchase designs online and still support your shop, Time Flies Quilt and Sew. So if you go to my homepage and just scroll down, you'll see my affiliate links for Kimberbell and also for Embroidery Online, which is OESD, and Scissor Tail Stitches, which is also OESD, Embroidery Online. If you click on the affiliate link, it will take you to those websites, but at the tail end of the web address, it will have a special code for my store number. And if you purchase online, I will get a commission. You'll help support the shop. And I have gotten very little. I've been talking about it more. So now I am aware when people are shopping. I don't know who is shopping, but I do get an email. So I know it's starting to work. But a lot of people haven't been just simply aware that that was an option. So when I no longer have my camera on my machine, I can share my desktop and I can show you how to do that. It's really, really simple. Just start at my website first and click on the link and it will take you to those sites. So I appreciate when you do that. Okay, I don't see any questions in chat, but I'm going to go ahead and go back to this screen where we have things split up. So right now, my number 1 screen is highlighted, and that's what you see on the screen. See the orange, and then there's orange that you can see on the screen. Everything else, all those other colors are grayed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to individually go through and I'm going to trash all 3 of those colors because I just want the calligraphy, the pencil drawing of the flower to be left. So where is the trash can? The trash can is in the little eye. Right now we have the group and ungroup open. So I'm going to go back 1 so I can see that trash can. There it is. I have number 1 highlighted. That's the one that I want to trash. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the trash can and there's the orange pieces and I'm going to say yes and touch the green check mark and throw those away. Okay, so now the hoop moved because now it would be where the pink is. Now I see pink on my machine screen and everything else is grayed out. And number 1 layer is where the pink is. So I'm going to go ahead and trash that. There it is. Say, okay, go into the trash can. Now my machine moved over to where the green is. And that's now number 1. And I want to get rid of that. So I'll go ahead and trash that. So now I am left with just a pencil drawing. That's kind of the look that I want for this project. And I want to just use that. I don't want to be changing my colors. I just want this nice graphic design. And now that I have my hoop attached, if I click and drag that, it's moving wherever I am moving that to. So I'm going to keep it right about in that lower bottom. Okay. Okay, I am going to close out of my little eye wanna, by touching that X button. And now I'm back to the main editing screen. And all I have on my screen is the calligraphy and that flower in the pencil drawing. Next, I want to add my name. How do I do that? I'm going to add a layer right here. So I'm going to click on the layer, and it took me back to the machine motifs. So the letters obviously are in the letter, but let me just stop and say, if I did a toolbox design and I have it on my USB stick and I want to add that to it, I would choose the USB stick. Okay, so it's up to you as where you're going to go. I want to go into the machine because I'm going to just use these letters. And I'm going to choose number 3. And I'm going to type in my name, capital P, small letters are down here, A-M, easy. And I'm going to hit the check mark. Okay, so now I have the word Pam. If I want to size it, I can go down 80% or I can go up 120%. But now I'm going to, well, I could just move it like this, or I can open up the I wanna button. And right now I could use these buttons. And let's shrink that a little bit. I'll shrink it down to, well, we gotta make sure it's locked. Okay. I wanna have it locked. Last time I was touching it, it was unlocked. So when I reopened it, it was unlocked. Okay, so I'll bring it down to like 87%. That's fine. I don't really like the look of that letter. I chose kind of an ugly one for this more beautiful design of a flower. So maybe I want to get rid of that Pam. Let's get rid of Pam. So Pam is highlighted. I'm going to trash it. Let's get rid of Pam. There it says Pam. Go in the garbage can. Yeah. Instead, I want to go and get maybe something more twirly and fancy. So I'm going to do it over again. I'm going to click on the plus sign, and it takes me right back to where I was. If I wanted to add another motif, I could go back and add another motif. But I'm going to go back and get a letter. Let's use this one. It's more fancy. P-A-M. Okay, there. That probably looks a little better when it comes to designing this. Okay. So let's move it up because right now it's on top of the flower. Oh, don't know what that was. Oh, it wants me to, well, I'm just gonna follow what it says. It needed to synchronize, I guess. Okay. So while I'm designing, I can leave my hoop off. That's not a big deal. Okay, so I'll add that there. And so I still have room in my hoop. Maybe I can see both of them together when I touch the bottom. So here I have both. I can see where it's placed. I can see exactly on the grid where things are. Maybe I'll move. Now, let me show you. If I have all of this and I start moving it, it's moving it as one piece because I have the bottom selected. If I want to just move the Pam, I have to touch the Pam and I can move it left or right or up and down. Okay, now I want to see it all. Touch the bottom. Maybe I'm going to add one more motif. I'm going to add another plus sign. Okay, and it opened up to where I was last. So I'm going to go back one on the breadcrumb menu, and I'm going to go into motifs. I have two choices here. These are fancy letters. What's in here? Let's do this one. Okay, so now that butterfly is selected. I'm going to move it up. And I'm going to mirror image that one because I don't want it going on the P. So I'm going to flip it this way. And now I'm going to move that over here. So see how I'm kind of designing this? So I flipped the butterfly. I moved it over to the right. Now I'm going to touch the Pam and I'm going to move it up and to the left. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Now I'm going to move it up, touch the bottom. Now I can see everything. That looks pretty good. Okay. So I'm liking that so far. What else can I do? So this bottom one that says 1, 2, 3, that is the sequence. So the way that this is going to sew is, first of all, number 1 is the flower. That is going to sew first. Number 2 is my name. That's going to sew second. And number 3 is going to sew the butterfly. If I wanted to change the sequence, I can do that by touching it. And I would have to touch one and move it down the elevator. So I'm going to touch number 3, which is the butterfly, and I'm going to move it down. So now Pam is above the butterfly. Maybe I want the butterfly to stitch out first. So it's going to do that. Why is this important? Well, when you get into the fine details of embroidery, there is a method to how things are stitched out. For example, this OESD towel, which is professionally designed by OESD, there was a method to the madness of how this was stitched out. It doesn't start from the bottom and work its way up. It's stitched, I'm trying to remember which way it's stitched. It might have stitched these pieces first, and then the pie, and then it stitched, I believe, the pumpkins at the bottom. And then the words, it didn't stitch it in the order that you read it. It was stitched, I think, if I remember correctly, these words from the bottom and it worked its way up. And then maybe these words and it worked its way in. And that's so it leaves it nice and smooth when it's stitching. Yeah, sort of like when you're quilting on a machine, you start in the middle of your quilt and you work your way out. There is a method to the madness in the sequence in which things stitch out. So that's your introduction to that. And that sequence, when you're doing it, you can say, well, maybe I'll start up here and then I'll have it go down here. You can move things around. So I'm going to leave it like this, where I'm going to start here. Secondly, it's going to stitch the flower, and last it's going to stitch my name. Okay. All right. This last one here is density. You can make some changes to density with your machine, either by turning it on and making some changes to this. I'm not going to go into that real in depth right now, because if you follow the 80-20 rule, for most of you, that's going to be just fine. We can touch on that in a later example. Okay, so now I have these 3 designs, and I closed out of my little eye. So now I can see this main menu, because what happens when you touch the little eye, it covers up that main menu. So now when it's closed, you can see the folder, the editing, the colorizing, and finally the main stitch out. So if I wanted to save this design, we can do that by going into the folder. Let's go to number 1, or the bottom screen. And I'm going to click on the folder, and now I'm going to choose the heart folder. And it saves everything when you hit the green button. So now this design is in this machine even after I turn the machine off. I can delete it later. I don't recommend that you save a lot in your machine, because unlike your computer, there isn't as much memory in a sewing machine, because there's a lot of memory needed for all the other functions of the sewing machine. But yes, you can save something if you want to. All right, so now I still have my hoop off. I'm going to go into the sew out screen. Now it's telling me to put my hoop on. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to hit the green check mark. So there's a couple of things I'd like to show you here at this point. And I have to grab. I don't know where we probably didn't take out the foam on these. And the spool cap. So now that we're in the sew out screen, I want to show you some points of interest here. What comes up here? The first one I like to show is the basting stitch, which is the square at the very top. So if right now it's going to start at the butterfly, and that's stitch sequence number 1. But if I touch the basting stitch around the hoop, that's also a 3-step process. So if I touch the basting, the first thing that it's going to do is it will go around the design. So it's going to make a square. If I touch it again, it is now going to change the look, and it's going to go around the hoop. So where you have your basting line really is up to you. If you touch it again, it turns it off. So there's 3 steps to it. Typically, I'm going to choose, for some reason this module isn't connecting. So if you get that design or that picture, it's not connected. So I was talking earlier. What's going on? Okay. So I just went ahead and redid it. Okay, so I typically will use that. That's a trick to help your puckers. There's some other things that you can do also, little tools, products. One is called Tyrial Magic. That's in this bottle here. This is a spray, and we always put it in a mister because this nozzle is like something from Menards. It doesn't work that good. So I like to mist that on and then iron my fabric, and it makes it almost like paper. The more that you use, the stiffer it is. And that helps to alleviate puckers. You can use 505 spray also sometimes when you are putting things into the hoop, and it's by Oeded. And that will help so your fabric doesn't lift off. I don't use that too often. I don't like the fumes. I don't want to get spray around my machine either. But I know people have asked me, some people that have done embroidery, and yes, you can use that as well. It's a temporary spray. So, see if this will allow me to put my hoop on. Okay. All right, so then the next thing that I'm going to do, when I sew this out, I'm going to touch this squiggle, and that's the sequence of like where you are in your stitches. And just to make things easy, I'm going to use this button that has red and some dots, red, green, blue. So it shows basically color change to all one color. That's what the little arrow is. So when I select that, it's going to not require me to do a change in my coloring. So sometimes if you want to do something all in one color and not stop in between, that's how you can do that. It's just by touching that button. So I'm going to put some blue thread in here. I really got to see what happens with Isocord. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some loops that are coming off. The Isocord really falls off of the spool easily, and a thread net or using the multiple spool holder will help. So we'll get a thread net on this so it doesn't fall off of the machine. So I'm going to show you how to put on a thread net. So we're going to put it in from the bottom, and then we're going to fan it out with our fingers. I'm more right-handed than I am left. And pull it over the spool of thread like that. And that helps hold it so it's the slippery polyester thread isn't falling off and getting caught. Because even with this, it's kind of hard to not bump the camera. One second, I'm going to move the camera so I can thread this. I know you can't see right now. Okay, here we go. And always use your thread cutter. Oh, and you know what else I didn't do yet? I didn't show you all the different settings, but I can do that now. So I'm going to go up to settings because this is a brand new machine. See what I mean about the straight stitch and the zigzag? That is sewing. We want to go into embroidery. So go into embroidery. I'm not going to adjust tension. I'm not going to adjust the speed. This one moves it to the center. I'm going to go ahead and do that. It might need to be off, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. This is the calibration, but I'm not going to do that. You should calibrate every hoop. I'm just running out of time to show you that today. So whenever you bring your machine home from the shop, if the technician has worked on it, they recommend that you calibrate your hoop. It's just to make sure that the center is dead on center. This is for what size thickness of fabric we are working on. We're working on very thin fabric today, so we'll leave it at 4 millimeter. If you're working on a really thick towel, you might want to increase it to 10 millimeters. So you have 3 choices there. This is thread away. Thread away is important when you are using multiple colors, or if you are stitching out pumpkin pie. You want it to be able to not have threads that are connecting in between. And by turning thread away on, the machine will move. You never know if it's going to go right or left or up and down. Just depends on where it is in the hoop, but it helps not drag that tail across your project. Right now, if I stitch in one color, there's no need to have it on. So I'm going to leave it off. If you're working with bulky fabrics, and using a topper, a lot of times we turn it off because it'll scrape that topper right off. The knots, I always leave those on. For the most part, there was a time where I did have to turn it off for a specific project, but you can see this one is at the end of the knot. It makes a knot at the end. And here the 3 little dots are at the beginning. So that one, it'll create a knot at the beginning. So what does that mean? It means like the designer, when there is a change and your machine cuts and now it moves to a different location, it is going to put a knot at the new location when it starts again, so it doesn't come out, whether the designer built in a knot or not. Not or not. So for example, right now I am wearing, I'm going to turn the camera around. I am wearing this design, and I learned when to turn the knots off when I got to the seeds. I did this project 2 times before I got it right. So I had my knots on, but look at the seeds. Those are only about 3 stitches a piece. So if you have a knot to begin with, and then it makes 3 stitches and it ends with a knot, you have more knots than what is designed. So I ended up having such a mess on the inside of my design. This one is not messed up. This is the way that's supposed to be. It's just a lot of different colors. So I wrote to OESD and I said, man, I am just having the heck of a time with the seeds of this design. And she told me to turn the knots off. So that's what I did. Right now, there's a green line on it. It's on. I turned them off just by touching it. And if you get the red, then those knots are off. And then I sailed through the project just fine. So that's what I mean. I learn and then I pass on what I learn to my customers. And I really like this jacket too. I get a lot of compliments for it. All right, so now we'll go back one. Scissors should be on between color changes, off for the second one. That has to do with older machines where you had to hold the thread. No longer do you hold the thread when you're embroidering. You just let it go. So it should be on, off, and then the default when it comes from the factory says 6 millimeters. You want to change that to 1. And that's the symbol for the jump stitches in between your projects. That needs to be 1. You don't want long jump stitches dragging across your work. So change that over to 1. And last is the way that you measure. You can have it as millimeters or inch. And I always set mine to inch on this. You can't change your sewing side to inches. That is always at millimeters, but here it might help you with hoop sizes and whatnot to have it at inch. If you have a design that's talking millimeters, well, you can always go in and change it. So that's kind of the message for, or the way I normally do things for settings. Now I had the message to remove my hoop because I went into settings. And now it's telling me to put my hoop on. So I'll go ahead and put my hoop on and I'll hit the green check mark. So now it's going to stitch out the basting stitch. When you have the green light flashing, it is time to sew. So I've got everything all set. I'm ready to go. So it's going to make a basting stitch, and I'm going to turn my speed up. So you can see the numbers here. This is an 8-minute sew out. And it's counting the stitches as we go. So I'm going to put 8,581 stitches on this brand new machine. And I have the color sequence as just one color. That's what that is. And so it's going to take 8 minutes. Oh, my camera's really shaking. To hold it so it's not as much vibration. Of course, this would be prettier if I did color changes, but that just takes more time. For purposes of learning, I figured let's just do it in one. The other picture that you have here is rabbit. And what the rabbit will do is it will bring your embroidery up to the highest speed possible. My technician says don't use embroidery or don't use the rabbit. Not only my technician in-house, but the technician at the main Bernina says, be careful, you might be asking for trouble if you go too fast. So this new module that is the Smart Drive technology, it is faster and quieter than the older one. And I've been told, and I haven't really used it a whole lot because we just got it. But it is more noticeable, I've read, with the speed of it with bigger hoops. So the bigger the hoop, the more you will notice that difference. Most of you have the older module. So now this is a refined stitch on this. And if I had a different color, it would show up more. But it's just kind of filling in more of the veins of that butterfly. And at some point, I'm going to stop and show you how to go back. And then because when you are embroidering, something inevitably will go wrong. And you want to know how to fix something, if you maybe run out of bobbin thread or your top thread breaks. So I want to be able to show you that too. How are we doing for time? 11. We've been quiet so far, so keep going. I won't have time for that on the next one. So at the point where it cut just now, it would have done a thread away where it would have moved sequence back and forth, and it's not. Bernina is the only machine that has thread away, and it really is a nice feature for when it is. There we have a little bit of a jump stitch showing. If it would have had thread away on, it wouldn't have left that little tiny thread there because it would have moved it out of the way. Or that one there too. There it pulled it enough where it took it to the bottom. Yeah, these would have all been different colors. If I would have left it with the different colors. I'm going to stop it. And I'm going to go into turn on thread away. So that's the needle with the arrows, and we'll turn it on. And maybe we'll be able to see the difference. I'll point it out if it gets to do it again. There, it moved, it bounced around a little bit first. Let's see if it does it. Well, it may not do it here. It's got a big jump regardless. That was a thread away. It did do it. That was a thread away. See how it bounces around? That is thread away. And I can watch on the screen. Here's a thread away. Woo! See how it moves around? Yeah, that way it pulls the thread away. And then when it starts stitching, it goes to the bottom again. That was a thread away. So if you imagine having a thick towel on here and you had a topping on it, it would probably get caught in that topping when it does that motion. So that basting stitch is just outside of the design, and it's easy enough to take out afterwards. Stabilizers, there's lots of different stabilizers that a person can use, and those are techniques. And I encourage you to join us for some classes. While this is stitching out, I'm going to show you this. OESD has a special going on for the next 3 months. If you spend $79 worth of OESD products, you get this design for free. And this design has a $74.99 price. There are cards, there are gift tags, and there are Christmas ornaments that you can make. And we use the Kimberbell. You want to go grab them from the front register? They're next to the acrylic. We use the Kimberbell felt when doing these. They're really cute. Last year's design had a lot of thread changes These ones don't, so they're quicker to make and they're not as dense, but yet they're really, really cute. We did a card class yesterday in the store. So what is OESD? OESD is your threads, it's your isocord, it's all your different stabilizers. Here we go. Here's one of the cards that we did. And that just has two different colors of greens, red and white. And it's on the gingerbread color felt, which is super cute. And OESD does make cardstock too. So the cardstock that we use is really pretty. Now, I would cover this after it's done, either with some more cardstock, some scrapbooking paper, or I did a baby card recently where I just used some fabric. This is the Christmas ornament, the hot cocoa one, so you can see how big they are, and that's 2 pieces of felt with some stabilizer in between and just a couple of different colors. So it's a cute way to adorn a Christmas package. I also wanted to point out a brand new OESD. Uh-oh, what happened here? There we go. I don't know why that button comes off once in a while. This is a brand new OESD USP extension pigtail that we got at the shop. And what this does, this helps to preserve your USB port on your sewing machine so it doesn't become damaged. So you would plug this end in where my thumb is touching into your machine, and then you can plug your OESD USB or any of your USBs that you have into this end when you are embroidering. So I don't use them in the shop because our machines aren't here all that long. But if you have, you know, a $10,000 machine, it's a great way to extend the life of your USB port. I know on my computer, my USB port is getting pretty loose. So I use my computer USB a lot. I could use this even on my computer. The other tool that I want to show you this, well, and these USB hubs, those are $10.99. They're on our store. The other tool that we could have used the last class was this loop and tail wand. So if you get a loop, which we sometimes do, on top of our embroidery, and you want to pull that to the back, you don't want to cut it because you don't want to cut your embroidery thread. You simply push the wand through from the top at the loop or the thread end and just push it through your fabric. This is like an emery board, very small, and it will pull that loop to the other side of your project. You can also use this if you have a snag on a sweater. I've used it on a really fine sweater where, oh, I was devastated. That's a $2.99 purchase. But anyway, spend $79 this month and you get the warm and cozy greeting card and gift tag US design. Next month, there's a mug rug design that's available. And there's a cozy that goes around the cups as well. There's lots of different mug rug designs. And then in September, October, November is warm and cozy embroidery. So there's lots of different embroideries. And as they show on the aprons, OESD does have aprons now, table toppers, towels, they've added a lot. You can embroider onto other projects. So now this is sewing along, and let's see here. I'm going to see where we're at. We're doing the stamens. Apologize for the shaking. But once it starts to go out on one of these petals, I'm going to stop it. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so let's say we had a thread break. I'm going to get the scissors. So there's our thread break. Okay. So you go ahead, you change your bobbin, and now you can see these different icons on your screen. So I call it the squiggle. It's the sequence, thread sequence. You touch that squiggle and you get this screen. So this is where you are at on the project. You can see the bullseye. And this is the magnified view. So you go ahead, you change your bobbin. Oops. Mounting completely here. Tighter. There we go. Okay. So when you touch your squiggle, notice where you're at on the project. So I would jot down these numbers or take a picture with your phone, because those numbers are the stitches, total stitches of the project and where you're at right now. So when you go here, just remember when I always like to go back a couple, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So I'm sewing on top of them. Yes, I do have the knots on. Remember the knots? So when I had this break, it will start out by knotting. I'm going to turn the speed down so maybe we can see that. And the knob, when you turn counterclockwise, it goes backwards. So you can see here, I'm -1, 2, 3, 4. There I went 4 stitches back. Important thing to learn, turn your zigzag stitch. That's the button that we use. Turn it counterclockwise and you go backwards. What happens if you turn it right to the right? You will go forward, okay? So turn it to the left to go backwards. That's the way that you most want to go. Okay, so now I have it real slow. I'm going to do 1001 for the button. Okay, 1001. So it's going to knot first. There it's knotting. I can see it. Now it's going to start sewing. So you can feel good for the fact that there is that knot function. When you have a thread break, it's going to automatically knot because there was not a knot built into the program at that point where you have a thread break. There never is. So hopefully this is making sense to you a little bit. I am recording this. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have a chance to edit it, but I might just go ahead and put it up on my YouTube channel, timefliesquiltandsew.com, so you can watch it again. Ooh, really shakes though when I turn it up. So if it's shaking really bad on your table, you don't want that. Turn it down a little bit because you don't want your embroidery module to disconnect, you know, if it's hopping along. And again, that's another reason why to bring your machine in for service every year. You know, it's a moving machine. Things can jiggle out of place. And when it comes in for service, Rick is taking the covers off and he's getting into parts that you can't get into. So now we're on the very last part, which is my name. So that beginning part was the knots. So when these are all designed, there's always that base layer. And the other thing when you're embroidering, especially if you're embroidering something bigger, you always have to make sure that your fabric doesn't get caught underneath or flip over and get stitched down. So you can use binder clips, you can use Oesd tape to take things out of the way. If you have any requests of classes that you would like to have, I have taught classes on how to embroider on a t-shirt. There's different stabilizers that we use for that. Obviously, I did how to embroider on denim when I did this Strawberry Fields design on this jacket. There was the thread away. So most of the times I do want thread away on. It just pulls that thread out of the way. So when it starts stitching again, it goes down. Also, you guys, remember that Bernina.com has lots of webinars, virtual classes that you can sign up for. Virtual classes do have a cost, but you are taking a class with a Bernina educator. And what I have learned has come from Bernina educators. They're wonderful, talented people. But you go to Bernina.com and support, learn and create, or whatever the tab is. I can show you that too when this is done. Let's see, how do I change something in a design? No, the pumpkin pie, I did not turn the knots off. The only design that I have turned the knots off was on my strawberries. Yeah, the machine will tell you when to change thread colors when you have that. I just stitched this all in one. So at the very final, you know you're done when you see the checkered flag. So you're done. There really isn't anything to do at that point. You take your hoop off, unscrew it, and remove it from the hoop. Okay. So some of those other questions, you really just need to take a class or watch this over again, just so you can have the information over again. So there, I did it all in one color. It didn't stop in between colors. If you left it with colors, it would stop and then give you time to change the thread, and then you would have to hit the go button. You can see when I didn't have thread away on, that thread doesn't get pulled to the back side. Everything else, there are no jump stitches. Okay. So, all right, so I'm going to change so you can see my screen. And let me find where I'm going to go. There we go. And now I got to go back to my Zoom. All right. Okay, so now you should see my computer screen. So one thing that I was talking about just a short time ago was Bernina.com. So learn and create. So if you click on learn and create, And here's classes, webinars, and events. Click on Learn More, and you can see what all there is going on. And scroll down. You can go down to Bernina, just as I have had the opportunity to go. If you want to really pay a bigger amount, you can go ahead and do that. But you can join Bernina educators and brand ambassadors for in-store education in Chicago, if you'd like to do that. For a lot of us, you can just be at home and take a virtual class or sign up for their webinars. I know a lot of people have done this and they love what they have learned. So it takes some of the, it helps me if my customers know more. So go ahead and sign up for these free virtual class or the free webinars, and there are free virtual classes too. And if you missed a webinar, you can go in here and sign up for them. I do have a Bernina Community Studio coming up. It is a Bernina event on October 2nd, and it is focusing on long arm quilting with a Bernina. So come sign up for our event. It's on a Saturday, October 2nd. And I have an educator named Betty Stoltenberg who's flying here from Portland, Oregon. And she is responsible for only Bernina long arms. So that is her forte. So as a dealer, I'm required to know it all. So it's great to have these inside people that can focus on something. So that is where you go for that. And then lastly, I wanted to show you, if you go to timefliesquiltandsew.com, sew.com right here. This is my website that I believe most of you are familiar with. And if you scroll down, here are my affiliate links. So if you wanted to download something directly from Kimberbell, if you go in here, it's going to have this information on the back end, which is my store number. So if you want to get something that you're going to download today, get it today. We'll click on products, and maybe you want to buy some background quilting. You can do so, and we'll get credit for it. So I appreciate when our customers are supporting our store. It means a lot. We're a small business and we're just getting started here, only in our 3rd year, but you can go ahead and order. Say if you wanted to get the Candy Corn Quilt Shop quilt designs, you can download them. There's 12 different designs here. You can buy them individually. Get rid of that. Or if you bought the whole thing, it would be $72 and you would get all of the different designs for that quilt. If you purchase it that way, we get credit. And I thank you very much for that. I do get an email when that does happen. If you order from Embroidery Online, click on the affiliate link and I will get credit for anything that you order from Embroidery Online. And if you click the affiliate link through Scissortail, we'll get credit for that as well. So there's lots of beautiful designs. Maybe you just want a part of it instead of the whole CD. You can do that and support our Time Flies Quilt and Sew all together at one time, no matter where you are. Okay, let me go back in here. Uh-oh. Oh, I think I timed out. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share. Oh no, there we are. Okay, I'm still here. Good. All right, so if I undo my camera and put my video back on, there we go. Now you see me. All right. Okay, so we are at 11:29. I gave you 2 hours worth. This was a long class. I want to thank you all for joining me. Do you have anything that you want to say or ask any questions really quick here before we go? You can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks,
It was very
Pam.
informative.
Good, good. Yeah, it's good to know the basics, but really you learn the most by doing. So we have our quilt retreat this weekend. I know some of you have signed up for that. We do have a few seats remaining. So if you would like to join us, you can. And don't feel bad if you don't get you'll probably still get your kit, I'm thinking, in time, because postage has been shipping a little bit better. But we do have a special guest, and it's Jana Thomas from Block Lock. And for all of those that are on our retreat, they're going to have access to a special for all things Block Lock. So it's a good way to learn about block locks. We have a group project that we'll be doing. We have different demonstrations set up. We'll have different Zoom rooms open. So if you have a group of friends, we can make a Zoom room for you and your friends. But I also want to encourage you, if you're on the retreat, to go ahead and pop into different Zoom rooms and just say hello. It was fun for me to do that the last time. Just say, "What you doing?" "Hi, I'm Pam. What you doing? Are you having fun? Show me what you're making." So it's been a lot of fun. And then on Sunday, we came up with a new idea. We're going to have an auction. And I'll tell you, ladies, right now that one of the items that we're going to auction is a baby quilt that one of our team members, Barb Rolling, had made, and Barb passed away. It was very rude of her to do that. We loved Barb.
I hate that when that happens.
Oh, I hate when that happens. It's like, hey, we were having fun with you. You can't check out on us now. But she was just a wonderful lady, and she made us quilt, and we're going to auction it off. And what we receive in the auction amount for that quilt, we're going to give it to the Nakamanon Trail Network, which is a biking ski trail, walking trail in the Marquette area. Her son is very instrumental and very involved with the Nakamanon Network and all of the different cross-country and mountain biking events that go on with it. So anyway, there's, I think, 8 seats left. So we have room for another group of friends. So if anybody can help us fill those seats, that would be great. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned and so happy.
Thank you.
Bye, Pam.
Bye.
Thank you.